Ariel Ruiz Soto. He's a policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute. Ariel, I just want to begin by finding out the status of some of these asylum seekers. Are they here in the United States legally or not?
Thank you for having me. The question about status for many of the migrants that we're seeing arriving at the ports of entry is a complex one. Many of the migrants who are coming are from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and for them, there's particular parole processes that would allow some of them to come into the country legally. It doesn't mean that it's happening for every single one person. We know that the border is different and complex, and that maybe some people are being paroled in one area of the border and some of them are not. So it really depends on what part of the border those migrants come through. But once they're into the United States, they have the right and the due process to seek asylum, whether from removal proceedings or affirmatively once they're in the country. So regardless of what their status is, once they are on U.S. territory, they're eligible to apply for asylum. And then potentially, if they receive that determination, have access to benefits.
Understood. So how do these asylum seekers, from how you understand it, end up on these buses or planes out of Texas and Florida? What were they told? Who paid for it?
Well, there's a couple of different, I think, experiences that we have been watching closely here. And one of them is that in the best case scenario, migrants are being screened by CBP officials. They're going through DH screen as well. And then they're being put in contact with state officials in Texas, potentially also in Arizona, and I guess now also with some Florida assistance. These migrants are told potentially where they're going, but they're not always told exactly what the process will be for them when they get there. There are some allegations, as the reporting that you just suggested, that many of them are not told clearly what will happen. At the end of the day, though, whether they're told clearly what will happen when they get to their destination or not, there is a serious consideration for many of them, because if, for example, they have an immigration court hearing in Texas or in Houston, and they make it to Martha's Vineyard or New York City or Chicago, and they do not change their address, they could actually miss their immigration court hearing and become deportable in absentia, meaning that because they did not show up to their court hearing, because they did not change their address, that they could potentially lose their opportunity to seek asylum in the country.
Wow. Wow. So I guess, what is next for these people, first of all, and talk about some of the journeys they've gone through to get here, what they've endured. We're talking about young children. We're talking about mothers, many of them, as you mentioned, from Venezuela.
Right. Well, Venezuela in particular has long had a tradition of migration through the region, but also through Mexico and now into the United States. And many of us have seen this, and I know that one of the perhaps biggest threats for migrants is crossing the Darien Gap, and that's the part of the jungle that connects Panama to Colombia and then going forward into Costa Rica. That jungle is largely difficult to pass and dangerous, and many Venezuelan, but also some Cuban migrants that end up arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border have to come to those conditions. In Mexico, usually migrants of these countries also face significant threats by cartels and other organizations, smuggling operations as well. But it's not always the same. It depends on where and what route they take. Once they make it to the United States, as we're seeing now, there is some lack of clarity of what's happening. But ideally, once they make it to their destination, whether it's Boston or Chicago or somewhere else, they should have a hopefully more certainty of whether will be their cases in the immigration courts, which is, again, one of the biggest concerns that many of us have.